Welcome to the training on elevating student voice by using youth as trainers. The audio today is by myself, Allyson Baptiste, who's a member of the Kern County Foster Youth Services and Homeless Education Coordinating Program, which is a part of Kern County Superintendent of Schools. So it's important to know that student voice practices cannot be taught effectively to other educators or other school personnel without utilizing youth with lived experience of homelessness as trainers. When we're talking about student voice and we're training on student voice, it's important to make sure that we're actually using transitional age youth or students to help explain these practices to other school personnel and adults. What's important to know, however, is that it may be helpful when you're attempting to use youth as trainers to try using transitional age youth first. Now, transitional age youth are defined by the federal government or Housing and Urban Development as those that are 18 to 24 years of age. Utilizing TAY, or transitional age youth, who had lived experience of homelessness while they were in school may be a bit more helpful to begin with. The reason why this is because 18 to 24-year-olds are defined as transitional age youth and are close to the age where they would remember what happened in their school age years, and many of them are also in post-secondary education. However, they would be able to have more time and more life experience to be able to help train other school personnel or other professionals. In addition, these youth would not need parent permission in order to help train, and you would be able to pay them a stipend or some other monetary incentive easier than a minor. So if you're looking to find transitional age youth who can help you train other school personnel and staff on student voice practices and how that impacts homeless students and youth, where do you find them? That's often one of the hardest questions to answer. So one amazing way to find these transitional age youth is to actually hire them under your staff. Peer support specialists are a great investment to your team. Peer support specialists are typically transitional age youth who have a lived experience of homelessness and can work directly with either other homeless youth, assisting them with things like case management, direct service, getting into education, etc. Or they can also be utilized to help train other school staff and professionals on how important it is to identify McKinney-Vento youth, to use student voice practices in order to assist in engagement of McKinney-Vento youth, and many other topics. On the www.kern.org/HIP website, you can see an example peer support specialist job description that the Kern County Superintendent of School uses. So we are very grateful that we at our COE have 2 peer support specialists under our homeless education program. These peer support specialists are very useful when working with other youth who need assistance with things like post-secondary education, college applications, FAFSA, and other items going on in their middle or high school grade levels. And these peer support specialists are very, very helpful in giving trainings and assisting us with trainings because they can provide what it was like being someone with lived experience of homelessness in school. If your COE or your LEA is unable to hire a peer support specialist so that you actually have someone full-time on your team that has lived experience of homelessness and can dedicate a lot of time to this, there are other ways to find transitional age youth trainers. You can offer a one-time stipend to a transitional age youth to help you just for one time doing a training. So instead of having them as a regular staff member, you would instead pay them a stipend for their time planning and preparing for giving a student voice training. And you would pay them for their time actually giving the training itself. Other ways you can find TAE trainers would be you can look for an intern. It's always recommended and best practice really is to pay our youth, especially our youth with lived experience, for their time. So if you are able to get an intern, it's still recommended that you would provide some kind of internship payment or stipend. However, of course, not all COEs or LEAs would be able to do that. So you could always get internship credit. The recommendation would be, of course, to work with a local community college or university and make sure that the internship credit would assist them with getting college credits or units. Other ways would be ask your local homeless organizations, the local shelters, the local advocacy groups, etc., who work with homeless individuals. Ask them if they're aware of anyone that would be any youth that would be a great advocate and a great trainer to assist in these student voice trainings. If your COC, which is Continuum of Care, has a youth action board or a YAB, that would be a fantastic way to find a TAE trainer. If you're not familiar with what a COC is, communities have COCs or continuums of care. Sometimes they are referred to as homeless collaboratives, and they're comprised of different agencies that often, many of them get housing and urban development funding for homeless projects. And many of them have different committees or subcommittees under their board. Many communities in California specifically, but also across the United States, have youth action boards under their COCs. Youth action boards defined by HUD are those that are 18 to 24 generally, or at least they have to be under 24, and have lived experience of homelessness. And these youth who comprise the Youth Action Board typically provide policy recommendations and other types of advocacy for homeless youth projects and funding in their communities. If you were able to get a hold of the COC Youth Action Board, that would be a great place to start, because you could actually locate many transitional age youth who have lived experience of homelessness, and many of them will have already had training on public speaking or advocacy. We are lucky in Kern County that our Youth Action Board chair is actually one of our peer support specialists. So because of that, that peer support specialist brings a lot of extra expertise and media and public speaking training to their role. Now, if you go through all of those options and you're still looking to find TAE trainers, I would also recommend that you ask your LEA liaisons. Ask the McKinney-Vento liaisons if they can think of any students or transitional age youth that would be great, or that they can think of that would be interested in supporting a student voice training by providing their own lived experience information during the training itself. So after you have your transitional age youth trainer identified, it's important not to just put the work on them. You still have to do your part first. When you are doing a training on student voice, whether it's student voice basics, whether it's a specialty of student voice, like student voice and best interest determination meetings, etc., it is your responsibility as the professional to first put together the basics of the presentation and utilize the transitional age trainer to supplement the training. So, for example, you would do your own research, put together your own PowerPoint or your own presentation, and then you would use the student or the TAE trainer as a supplement to that, to just explain how maybe things would have been easier for them had they been listened to while in high school or middle school. What would have been different if school personnel would have utilized student voice practices? What student voice practices they feel are the most important, etc. But the whole training should not be completed or focused on the youth. They should only be used as a supplement because they're really being hired to talk about their lived experience in this situation. They're not being hired to do all of your research for you and the entire PowerPoint for you. So again, you want to be using your youth trainers to complement your main presentation with their own experiences and thoughts. I do need to make a very important note here. At the bottom of the slide, you can also see that it says that you have to be prepared to spend a significant amount of time prepping the youth and helping them practice public speaking. It will not be useful to you, and it will not be useful to the youth, and it will not be useful to the audience if the youth is scared. They have had no time to prepare. No one has assisted them in preparing, and they are not able to really voice what they wanted to get out during the presentation. It is important to know that we do not want to be putting youth on a stage and without preparation and without them feeling comfortable. So if you are a person that typically gets ready for a presentation in the few days ahead of time, and then you look at the presentation the morning of and then just go ahead and give it, that's a fantastic skill to have. However, that will not work for our youth. It would be suggested to at least start prepping them a couple weeks in advance and then have multiple meetings with them to prep for the training before the training actually happens. And not only with preparation that you provide yourself, but it's important that if you're going to use a youth trainer, that you provide them or get them connected to some kind of professional development on public speaking before putting a spotlight on them. So the best practice would really be to put them in professional public speaking classes or courses, and then continue preparing them for weeks ahead of time after that. It is important that we make sure we are providing leadership development to our youth leaders because we want them to become better student voice advocates themselves. We do not want to fall under tokenism and be exploiting our youth just so that we can say we had a youth speaking with us. We want to make sure that our youth are truly becoming leaders and they're learning alongside us as they pick up new skills. And I touched on this briefly, but be careful of tokenism when you're using a youth trainer. If you're not familiar with tokenism, this is a great quote from the organization Choice for Youth and Sexuality. And it says, tokenism is when young people are invited to participate, but only in a superficial manner, because in reality, young people do not have a voice and their opinions are not listened to. So it's important that if you are asking a youth to speak alongside you on any training, that you are truly wanting them there and you are truly appreciating their lived experience and you are truly validating their lived experience. We do not want to be inviting youth to speak with us just to check a box. If you're inviting a youth to speak with you just to check a box to say that you had a student there, then that can fall under tokenism. So be very careful with that. Now, here's different ways you can actually use transitional age youth during student voice professional development presentations. Like I said, it's very important that you have the basics of the student voice presentation already created and that you are giving it yourself and they're supplementing you. But with supplementing you, here's some different ways you can utilize them. Number one, you can have them discuss how feeling heard would have helped them be more successful in school. You can encourage them to use real life examples of difficulties they experienced as a homeless student. And what's very important is only encourage them to the extent they are comfortable sharing their personal histories publicly. If we encourage youth to speak about things because we feel like they'll get a better audience reaction, or it's a sadder story, or it's a more heart-tugging story, that can definitely fall under tokenism. We do not want to be taking advantage of our youth who are presenting. We only want them to talk about their experiences to the extent that they are comfortable with. Even if you maybe know about a very traumatic experience that they had and you feel like it would be a great supplement to the presentation, if they do not feel comfortable speaking on that, please do not force or encourage them to do so. Now, you can also use the professional development as a way to help the youth build their own public speaking leadership skills. You can allow them to run small group activities or discussions during the professional development training that doesn't necessarily have to do with them being youth with lived experience. They could run a game, they could run a small group, just facilitating questions from others, etc. They do not always have to be utilized to talk about their lived experience. They can learn public speaking and leadership skills by doing other parts of the presentation as well. Another way to use transitional age youth during student voice PD presentations can be to acknowledge that they are experts of their own lived experiences. So we always want to respect and acknowledge that TAE trainers are experts of their own lived experiences, and we do not know their experience better than they do. Also, we can allow the audience to ask them questions regarding their perspectives and opinions about situations that maybe they experienced on their school site or are experiencing on their school site. So for example, in a lot of trainings, people raise their hand at the end and say, I have this current situation, or I have a student who's doing XYZ, I don't know what to do. In those type of scenario questions, the youth trainers can also provide feedback on, based on them being a homeless youth in the past or currently, what they would have wanted a school professional to do or help them with in that specific scenario. And then what's very, very important is to make sure that if you're using a youth trainer, you teach them how to respectfully decline to answer questions that are too personal for them. We do not expect our coworkers and our colleagues to answer questions from other school personnel or professionals that are too personal. We would not have an expectation that someone in the audience could raise their hand and ask about our divorce, for example, or our lost child, or our chronic illness. We would not be expected through work to have to answer those. Because these youth have lived experience and are being open about that, they're probably going to be more open to answering a lot of questions related to their lived experience. However, make sure that they're aware they do not have to answer anything regarding their lived experience they are not comfortable with. However, it's important for you to also teach them as a professional how to respectfully decline answering questions that are too personal for them. Types of student voice trainings you can actually use youth trainers in are as follows. If your LEA or your COE wanted to give a training on basics of student voice or student voice 101, if your LEA or COE is working on some kind of student voice and multimedia, maybe you have a student voice podcast, etc., they could assist with that. You can use them if you're talking about evaluations and monitoring with student voice. And another great one to utilize them for would be if you're doing a training on student voice and how that factors into youth advisory boards. But it's also very important that we are looking at the youth as experts of their own lived experience, and ask the youth that you're working with, what student voice trainings do you think that professionals or school personnel need to know in order to make campuses better? They may come up with a completely innovative idea that you haven't thought of before, and help them and help talk to them about that and try to understand what is missing and how you both can move forward with a training in that area. So after you have TAE trainers who have experience giving multiple adult PDs on student voice, these TAE trainers can actually assist in teaching middle and high school students how to also provide adult PD. It is recommended that you have TAE trainers assist you with this, because then the middle and high schoolers can actually hear from other youth, even though they're a little bit older, about what's worked for them and what hasn't worked for them. And by utilizing these transitional age youth, they can help teach the middle and high schoolers how to appropriately give a training to adults on student voice. Now, what's very important to know is I already stated that any youth who are being given an opportunity to do public speaking have to have tons of support, and you have to do a lot of time with them planning and preparing. However, with middle and high schoolers, you need to at least double that time of support, if not triple it. They will need a lot of support around leadership development and public speaking skills because they are still minors and don't have as much lived experience in the world talking publicly or doing any types of trainings. So make sure that if you are moving forward with this and trying to have middle and high schoolers assist with professional development trainings for adults, that they are given a lot of support and training around public speaking and leadership development. Now, if you are looking for more individual coaching on how to use youth with lived experience for student voice professional development trainings, you can go ahead and email us at fosteredcoordinator@kern.org. I also highly recommend that you go on the www.kern.org/HIP website. Under the tab that talks about youth as trainers, where this training is also located, there is a tip sheet created from one of our peer support specialists about lessons learned as a peer support specialist. There's also a tip sheet under that tab about lessons learned from a trainer with lived experience. So please take a look at those as well. Check out the www.kern.org/HIP website for other trainings regarding student voice practices. Thank you.